You're listening to the Heart Lessons podcast with me, Sarah Rieke. Real women, real stories, real faith. Hi, friend, and thank you for joining me for episode 21 of the Heart Lessons podcast. Today, my guest is Kami Lingren from the Living Grace blog, where she chats about her journey with chronic illness. And I actually found Kami's blog when I was searching for resources for my mom, who is struggling with chronic illness. And at the time, we were trying to research Lyme disease and find out more about it and see if that was what was her issue. And so I came across Kami's blog and started reading it and thought it would be helpful for my mom. But then I also thought, well, maybe she would want to share her story on my podcast. And so I reached out to her and she graciously agreed. But she said, I just want you to know my story isn't packaged up neat and tidy with a little bow. I'm still, in the process of processing everything that's going on and finding out how God's fitting into this illness journey. And I said, that is just fine. I love authentic. I love vulnerable. I love real. I love sharing people whose stories might be a little bit messy and unfinished, but who are still seeking the Lord in the midst of it and still reflecting His grace and bringing others along in that journey as well. So I'm so excited for you to hear Kami today as she talks about her struggle with Lyme disease and what it looks like for her on a day-to-day basis. She shares a little bit about that journey. She shares how friends and family can help someone struggling with chronic illness. And her heart lesson is just really wonderful and one that resonated with me. She talks about how something specific in Jesus' life while he was here on earth is helping her through her journey with Lyme disease. So I know you're going to love Kami. She has such a sweetness about her, and you are going to learn so much from her today. So here's my conversation with Kami. Well, thanks for everyone who's tuning in today. Here on Heart Lessons, I like to try to find women who are walking well in what the Lord has for them. And today I have Kami Lingren. Is that how you pronounce it? I forgot to ask.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and she writes on the Living Grace blog. So hi, Kami. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
So I would love to chat about everything you share on your blog and your experience with chronic illness. And but first, maybe would you share a little bit about who you are, maybe who's in your family, where you live? Because I know we're on opposite ends of the country.
Sure. So I live with my husband. His name's Trevin in Southern Oregon. And we actually just moved here in January, and we're loving it. It is beautiful here. We have a dog named Tuka, and she keeps me company. I'm at home every day because I fight Lyme disease, and so she's my companion here at home. And like you said, I write on Living Grace, and I've really loved that outlet for me. It's been a very healing and therapeutic outlet for me to connect with other people going through similar, hard struggles, either with illness or fill in the blank, whatever hard thing they're going through. And so that is how I spend my days most days, is working on the blog and working on treatment and healing.
I love that. I think when you're going through, like you said, you can be going through anything, but when you find somebody who's walking through something hard, you can just connect on that level, no matter what the hard is. So
yeah.
I appreciate, that perspective. And your tagline on your blog is finding life in the desert. And I just love that, because when we walk through something difficult, when the Lord asks us to walk through something difficult, He doesn't ask us to become paralyzed. He still wants us to grow, and He still wants us to learn and hopefully influence others positively. And so I think it's great that you are doing that. And I admire people who kind of rise above their circumstances and say, this is tough, but here's a different perspective. So like we said, you struggle with chronic illness, specifically Lyme disease. Would you tell me how this whole journey started? And I know Lyme disease can often be kind of elusive, kind of an elusive diagnosis. So was it a long road to get to where you are?
It was a very, very long road. And it tends to be, what I found in connecting with other people who have Lyme disease is that this is pretty common, that, you find symptoms early on and it just takes a long time to get to diagnosis. And so that was very much my story. I would go back to as early as my early childhood, remembering symptoms beginning back then.
Oh, wow.
But of course, I was a kid, and most doctors think you're looking for attention if you're coming in with symptoms that they can't see that are happening.
Yeah.
And so, we really feel like that's probably where things started for me.
So what were those symptoms like as a child?
So as a child, they would vary. I was very frequently very dizzy. I would get lightheaded. I would pass out. Early on, I had very intense anxiety, and there were never really full-blown explanations for why I had all these symptoms that were going on. And I'd have random ER visits for abdominal pain, and they wouldn't be able to figure out what was wrong, so they just send me home with pain meds and hope it would just clear up on its own. And so that was kind of my childhood, littered with all of these different unexplained infections and episodes, and just managing. I was able to manage. It wasn't as if I was missing tons and tons of school or anything. I did well in school, but it took until 2010 for me to have a very severe episode that kind of shook me up and made it very clear that, hey, there's something very serious wrong here for me.
Yeah. And then what was that? What was that episode?
So I remember I woke up one morning and I felt like a really bad cold was coming on. I mean, really bad. It was very interesting. I felt a lot of pressure in my head, a lot of pressure behind my sinuses, and so I assumed that was what was going on. But when I woke up Monday morning at the end of a weekend of feeling that way, woke up Monday morning for work, and I remember opening my eyes and looking at the wall across from my bed, and everything in my room, everything on that wall was disjointed. It was as if I was looking through a kaleidoscope.
Oh, wow.
Like, everything just felt off, and I was very dizzy. I had vertigo and dizziness. I was too weak to walk on my own. And so, I called out of work, and I missed 2 weeks of work because I spent those next 2 weeks just completely debilitated and going through tons of tests, and doctors who they couldn't see my symptoms.
Yeah.
And so they didn't really know what to do with me. But it was apparent that something was wrong. And so I went through, my body seemed to recover, quote unquote, recover on its own. And so I spent the next year in tests, just tons and tons of tests and blood work. And finally in 2011, I was actually first diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
Okay.
And I remember feeling relief mixed with fear, just, not really sure what life was going to look like, but the doctor felt really hopeful, and so I kind of held on to that.
Yeah. Thinking
okay, well, maybe I'll just have relapses here and there, but I'll be able to manage, I'll be able to live, and treatment should help. And then, flash forward to 2013, 3 years ago, my health just crashed, and I have not been the same since. Since that summer of 2013, I have just had a multitude of symptoms that just have not gone away. And so that first year, I kind of think, Sarah, that I was just like, okay, this is the end.
Oh, wow.
I'm not going to be able to live again, and this is just how it's going to be. And we kept thinking, okay, this is MS, and it probably has just turned into progressive MS.
Yeah.
And we went through, a few doctors, and no one really knew what to do with me. And we got to this point of desperation in the beginning of 2014. And over the course of the first few months of that year, we began to question, what really is going on? Is it really just MS, or is there some other root cause? And so, sorry, this is a long story. Story short.
Were you continuing to have those were you continuing to have those symptoms of the dizziness, or did it progress into muscle fatigue? Because isn't that what MS has, like, muscle fatigue and weakness?
Yeah, MS, there's, muscle fatigue, there's weakness. There are quite a few symptoms within MS that can range for each patient, but I had a lot of neurological symptoms as well. Okay. I was starting to notice, like, memory loss, and it wreaks havoc on your nervous system. That's how a lot of people are able to classify MS is by looking at MRIs of your brain. And so I had a lot of lesions on my brain, and so there's a lot of effect that's happened from those. So I had a lot of neurological issues, heart palpitations, chest pain, tingling in my limbs, severe fatigue. I've had constant head pain for the last 3 years. It's never gone away.
Wow.
So we started to question it, and through a series of events, we found ourselves thinking that I had Lyme, and met with a specialist, and she confirmed through tests. And it's also, tests with Lyme disease, this is kind of the struggle with getting diagnosed, is that tests can come back so inaccurate. And so really needing a clinical diagnosis from a specialist was where we finally found our answer, was talking with her, and in combination with the test, she was able to see that I had a chronic version of it. So
yeah,
that was 2014, and so I've been treating for 2 years, and I'm still very, very sick. We're working hard to uncover all of the layers, but it is definitely a challenge, for sure.
Was being diagnosed with Lyme disease a low point for you, or was it similar to, like, when you had that MS diagnosis of, like, okay, well, here's something, now we can move forward?
Yeah, I think similar to MS, it was a mixed feeling of, talking with the doctor. At that time, my very first doctor felt that I would see improvement within 1.5 to 2.5 years. And so there was that tiny bit of hope of, like, okay, she has hope that I can get better. Even if I can't fully get over this, I can get better. And she also prepared me, though, that it was going to be very, very hard. And that's how every Lyme patient experiences it, is you go through these reactions called Herxheimer reactions. And so you start treatment, and the treatment kills the bacteria. But when the bacteria dies off, they release tons of toxins into your system, and you feel worse more than you feel any sort of improvement. And so it's kind of this very dark journey, for sure, because you're taking treatment to get better, but you start feeling just even worse. And it's hard to keep your eye on the idea of, okay, at some point this isn't going to be how it is.
Yeah.
But going through that over and over and over can really weigh heavy on you, for sure.
It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or one step forward, 2 steps back.
Or sometimes the opposite way, like 2 steps back, and you feel like, can we get back a couple more steps? So ebb and flow, always.
That's got to be frustrating. Did you feel at some point that you had to, I know you mentioned something about having grace in grief. Did you have to at some point grieve the loss of, like, normal you, like the you that you thought you were going to be?
Yeah, I think that's never quite fully gone away either. And so that's been a lesson in grace too, of just, it is hard to lose that, but I feel like there are different layers to it. In the beginning, I think there's this part of you that's holding on that you're going to be able to see that person again, or a version of that person again.
Yeah.
And then, when you've been sick this long, this bad for 3 years, I think this year it's kind of been like a whole new layer of, okay, well, trying to come to an acceptance point of, if I am this sick, like, how do I accept that this is where I am for right now, and being able to still grieve and be okay with being sad sometimes about that, because it is a very real sense of loss, not being able to function normally, not being able to interact with people normally because of the various symptoms that I have. So yeah, I'm still learning that, for sure.
Yeah.
But yes, I do feel like there has to be grace in giving yourself permission to feel that grief when it comes, and allow yourself to go through that process so you can heal.
And not letting yourself, like, not just always pushing it back, like, the Lord has a plan, God's still good, which are all very true, but there's there is an element of like your soul that needs to acknowledge that it's hard.
Yes, I so agree with that.
Yeah. Did you have any elements of denial, like when they gave you your diagnosis? Like, oh, that's, this isn't really what's going on.
I didn't have denial when I finally got diagnosed, but I did in the months before, because I had seen several, like maybe 2 or 3 people who were contacts of mine posting about their illness of Lyme disease on Facebook, and I would say, oh, that looks, kind of like mine, but that's probably not the case, and I would dismiss it over and over again until, finally there was just this turning point where we got an email from our mother-in-law, my mother-in-law, and a friend of hers had encouraged us, maybe it's not MS, you should probably look into it being Lyme. So I definitely went through denial in the precursor to my diagnosis of just not really wanting to accept that could be my case.
So now every day you're living with this reality that you have Lyme disease. You're walking through the treatment plans, going through ups and downs, like you said, sometimes a lot more downs and backwards steps. But what does it look like on a day-to-day basis to live with chronic illness? Like a typical day for you looks like what?
So for me and many others with at least Lyme disease, and I've found that even others with other chronic illnesses feel the same way, but it takes me a while to actually fully wake up in the morning, and it's partly because of how awful you feel when you first wake up. And so I'm laying in bed awake probably for at least an hour, if not 2 or 3, just waking up for the morning, because it's so intense and it takes a while to kind of catch your balance. And then as far as the day-to-day with everything I do, I spend a lot of time healing. And what I mean by that is I have different detox protocols that I have to get in every day. I have a very distinct supplement schedule of things I have to get in throughout the day and stay on top of. And it often feels a lot like work, because on the days where I'm feeling really bad, it's hard for me to stay on top of everything just with healing. And then from the social standpoint, I spend most of my days at home, and a lot of that, it's not laziness, it's not wanting to be around other people, it's literally because of my health limitations. I can't drive myself, and a lot of my neurological sensitivities make it difficult for me to even interact with people. It takes a lot out of me.
Yeah.
I'm already very fatigued, and it takes a lot out of me to prepare my whole day around spending time with someone. All of my treatment protocols and everything, that takes me time and effort. To add something else into the mix when you're already so sick and so weak can be really hard. So there's definitely an aspect of loss in that regard, because a lot of us in chronic illness are this way. We have to stay home a lot of the time so we don't push our bodies, past the edge. So I found a lot of my community online, and so every day I'm spending time interacting with other people who are ill, whether it be texting a friend who has Lyme, or connecting with others on the blog, or in different support groups. And so community looks a lot different for me in illness, but it's still there. And I think that's been important for me, is to find it within my limitations.
Yeah.
Being able to still connect with people and encourage others, and be encouraged myself also within that.
Yeah. And there is something about community and people who are going through something similar. It's just
very true.
I don't know what it is. Just I guess maybe because you can say, here's how it is, and another person says, I get it, and they really get it.
Totally.
And it feels really, that feels good. And what would you say is the hardest thing about living with a chronic illness?
I think for me, I struggle most with the unknown. We still are clinging to hope that I will, improve. And when I have what we call a better day, I don't have great days. I don't even really have good health days, but I have better days than my norm. And so those help us when they come. They're kind of few and far between right now, but when they come, they help us cling to a little bit of hope. But the unknowns of how long is my life going to be this way can be challenging. And I would say that's probably the most challenging, is the unknowns. And the second would have to be kind of the isolation. Even though I have community, it is a struggle with loneliness for sure, because it just looks so different than what I was used to for so many years.
Yeah.
So those are probably the top two things that are the hardest for me.
So I was just actually reading on your blog a little bit, and you it was something about dreams and how you used to have, you know, a bucket list of typical dreams, and now you just had to shift your mindset to, I still have dreams, but they look different. They kind of look more like, maybe I can go out and get coffee today, or maybe I can actually go on a drive with my husband. So what has that been like for you to have to, you know, shift those dreams and shift that perspective?
I think that it's been, in the most honest sense, it's been challenging, but I feel like there's been kind of freedom feels like such a big, beautiful word. It doesn't necessarily feel as big and beautiful, but there has been this freedom for me to kind of give myself permission to rethink things for now, like not to feel as if, and I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there's a healthy acceptance that we can have of the hard things. It doesn't mean that we don't have, you know, our glimmers of hope in the corner, but it's kind of giving ourselves permission to just be in the moment of our heart. And so for me, with shifting dreams, I think that gave me that freedom of, okay, I will always hold those. I'll put them on the shelf for now. Those will stay on the shelf and they will be there. And I will always have those dreams, you know, traveling and having children someday and being able to be a part of society in a normal capacity. Like, I will have those, and those are healthy, good dreams to have. But for right now, so that I don't get in this cycle of continuous grief over those dreams, which is fine. Like, there are days I still feel that, but it's given me a way to have things to look forward to still and be able to celebrate them, I guess, for the beautiful moment that they are, whether it's just being able to sit outside on my front step, which some days can be a big, you know, achievement for me after I've been stuck in bed for a week. So, like, things like that, being able to enjoy those moments more has come out of this shifting of dreams, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like you had to change your expectation.
Yeah. In order to survive, yes.
Yeah, right. Well, you shared with me, I actually don't know how long ago this happened, but that you had an unexpected pregnancy and then you lost that baby. And so surely that was, you know, on top of, like you said, it's a little bit of a dark road walking through chronic illness, even though you're trying to do it as best as you can. But what was it like for you to have this, you know, sort of added shadow?
Oh, man, yeah, it was heavy. And I think, like, to kind of, like, give a picture of why it was so heavy, in addition to just, like, the chronic illness journey being so hard, we lost our baby last year, and last year is, like, for us, looking at these last 3 years, last year was the year that was, like, the worst of everything. And we started the year off with a really serious ER visit, and then a month after that, in May, we were in the ER, and my heart stopped. And my husband had to experience the very real possibility that he was going to lose me, and I had to walk through that place of, like, I almost died. And so there was this, the year started off with a lot of heaviness, and when I came out of that hospital, I was in the hospital for about a week after that episode where my heart stopped, and obviously my heart began beating again. But we went home, and a month after that happened, we found out that we were expecting, and we were, like, so overjoyed about it. For us, it felt like this bright beacon of hope in a really dark, bleak season. And so there was a lot of anticipation and a lot of excitement. I mean, there's a lot of that comes naturally with anyone who's, you know, finds out that they're expecting. But there is this very unique expectation we had for this, you know, piece of joy that was just felt like it was planted right in the midst of our darkness. And so when we lost our baby, it was devastating. I felt like that was probably my darkest time of asking all of the hard questions, you know, why, and not really understanding that kind of punch in the gut feeling of we were so close to having this beautiful thing and feeling like it was snatched away in a sense. So I think that, and even since, you know, we've had some traumatic things happen, and so grieving that for me has taken quite a bit of time to get to where I am today. And it's still hard, and I still, you know, grieve that loss, but it's been a hard one to be able to heal from and to be able to fully grieve that alone, because there's so many other added layers to it. Right. I don't know if that's making, if that's that clear.
Because that loss came with, you know, all the other trauma that you were experiencing. You had to process it all.
Yeah.
I can imagine how, you said you feel like it was snatched because, like, you weren't expecting that to happen. And it was like a sweet surprise, and then, like, the rug got jerked out from under you.
That's a very good picture. Yeah, that's how it felt. That is how it felt.
My pastor often says, I might get this wrong, I sure hope I don't, but he says, God will sometimes hurt you, but he'll never harm you. And I think that's it's very confusing. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why does that have to be part of it? Just as you're walking through hard things, just trusting that it's more than that thing. There's something bigger.
Well, I never would want to go through that or ever wish it on anyone. I feel like there's been moments where I've connected with other people who have faced that. And even if they can't relate to my sickness journey, we can bond and connect over that pain and understanding with each other. And there's a lot of healing that comes from that, I've found, in being able, kind of what you were saying earlier, there's just such a deeper connection that's involved when you meet someone who's faced that same thing. And so I'm definitely thankful for that coming out of it.
So as you live with chronic illness, surely you have friends and family who want to help you but feel pretty helpless. But what can a friend or what can a loved one do to help their loved one who's struggling with chronic illness?
That's a great question. I feel like it's taken a lot of, you know, each of us from either side, like me being able to explain what my life is like and then asking questions has been probably the most helpful, because you're showing that person that, you know, you're not going to just pass off a cliche phrase to them of like, you know, always looking on the bright side, but you are actively wanting to know what life is like for them. And I think that in understanding that and in hearing their story, you then are able to enter into that place with them, but you're also able to know tangibly what things could help them. Like for me, it was when we were living close to Trevin's mom, she would make us meals, and that was so helpful, because whereas I may have to, like, you know, miss one of my treatments one day because I had to spend my energy on making a meal, I could then have that for myself. And so, you know, I think it's asking is what I come back to a lot when I'm talking to people about how they can help someone. Like, I think instead of assuming, you need to just ask, like, how can I be there for you? Is there anything that I could do that would help you out? And maybe even spend some time. There are a lot of blogs that write about this and give ideas. I have an article or two on mine, you know, giving tangible ideas of what you can do to help someone, you know, like saying you're going to the grocery store, hey, I'm going to the grocery store, can I pick you up a bag of groceries? You know, it's tangible things like that that let them know you get it, like you hear that it's a really hard season for them and you want to do more than just ask them how they're doing.
Yeah, that's super practical. I think that's really good advice for sure. What about, like, you know, coming over to sit with you or something? Or is that, I mean, I'm sure that's personal, but I feel like sometimes when I'm going through something hard, it's easiest for me to just be by myself and not have to like put on a brave face or something like that. Do you feel like that? Like it's like sometimes it's easier when I'm by myself.
Yeah, it can feel that way. And I think that the times when I have had people come and sit with me, the most powerful moments have come from people just being able to sit in that with me and not feel the need to fix me or fix my perspective, because you sometimes hit really hard moments where you just are naturally feeling the heart of what you're going through. And so people who would come and be able to just sit with me in that and say, yeah, man, this is so hard. I wish you didn't have to go through this. Or do you want to talk about, how things are going? And sometimes it was just, hey, will you watch a movie with me and lay on my opposite couch and we'll just hang out together. Those are some of the most beautiful moments of people just being willing to enter into that space with you.
Yeah.
Without needing the conversation to have to be maybe all about sickness or all about the hard, but you be able to still have space for that if you need it.
So through your blog and your ministry that you have there, what do you hope to communicate to others? Either those that are going through chronic illness or those that are just trying to learn more. What are your hopes through your blog?
I feel my biggest hope is to remind other people that they're not alone. And I know that probably seems super cliche, but what I mean by that is that I want to connect with them on the deeper things, the veins of pain, and reminding them that they're not the only ones going through that there are people that they can connect with that understand, and that they still can have purpose in the midst of whatever their heart is. And I think for me, it took me a while to believe that for myself, that I could still have purpose even though I was am so limited, and my life has changed so much, feeling like, well, I'll have purpose once I get better. Like, I will have purpose once I'm not sick and fighting disease every day and feeling like really beaten down by my illness. I think I kind of felt like I had to be in this bright, sunny, perfect place that I was just not able to see myself being in the midst of sickness. And so I felt like I didn't have purpose. And I feel like that's probably the bigger message I'm hoping to encourage others with. Like, it doesn't have to be that your purpose looks like it was before, but you can still have purpose where you're at.
Yeah, I love that. I actually heard a testimony of a woman who, I don't know what her illness was, I can't remember, but she said she was, a very career-driven woman, and then she found herself just like not able to get out of bed. And she said, I just struggled with, like, God, what use am I anymore for you? Like, I can't even get out of bed. And she just came to the conclusion that, like, just because she was a child of God and he loved her, like, even as she laid in bed, that was his purpose for her in that moment. And I just think, like, like you were saying earlier, a powerful just like expectation shift. Like, I don't even have to be doing anything to be like bringing glory to the Lord. If I'm where I'm supposed to be, even if it's just laying in bed, like, he's glorified and this is my purpose. And surely I'm not saying that's an easy conclusion to come to, but it is a conclusion that that exists, that God, God's not looking at you or anyone else who can't get out of bed saying like, well, I guess I can't use them anymore. Like, that's exactly, his purpose. So, well, as you continue to walk this road that God has for you, what would you say your heart lesson is that he keeps speaking to you, that kind of keeps you going, that sometimes I like to say, like, maybe your heart song?
I think for me, one of the most powerful lessons that I've learned in the last few years is that it's not unholy to be in the midst of the darkness of where your heart is sitting, like in response to the struggle. And part of what's giving me comfort and in coming to that place is going back to the passage in John where Lazarus dies. And, Jesus is walking out to Lazarus' sisters, and as they tell him what's happened, that their brother has passed away, we all remember the shortest verse in the Bible, like he wept. And when I think of the fact that, Jesus was God's son, he was all-knowing, all-powerful, and I think he not only knew that he had the power to bring Lazarus back from the dead, but he knew, like, he could foresee that he was going to do that. And when I let the reality of that idea sink in, that even though he had, in my mind, the most potent hope there could be, like, he knew Lazarus was going to be okay. He knew that Lazarus was going to be brought back to life. But he gave himself permission to sit in the weight of that grief and that pain and that loss of losing his friend. And I think that it's been healing for me to look at that in a different light, to see that Jesus himself demonstrated that he's not only okay with when we're sitting in these hard places, but he's demonstrated through his own actions that there really is a time when you just sit in the emotions and you sit in the grief and you give yourself the space and the time to heal. And I think, over these last few years, as my husband has faced trauma after trauma, and just one after the other, discouragement has been just a natural counterpart to that. And it's felt natural to feel like, man, God is super silent, and where are you, God? And how is this fair? And, will this ever change for me? Will I ever not be sick? And I feel like this story of Lazarus and this idea that it's not unholy to be in this place of darkness. It doesn't mean that I don't love God. It doesn't mean that, God doesn't love me. He doesn't love you if you're going through something hard, whoever's listening. But I feel like the picture that I try to cling to in that is that God, this picture of God sitting with us in those places. He's not hurrying us to, like, hey, hurry up and get over these feelings that you have. Or he's not telling us we need to feel something different. He's just being there in the midst of that muddy mess of pain and grief or loss, and he's hurting with us. And I think that me accepting that picture and reminding myself of that picture has helped me to find not just healing, but to find this place of rest for my spirit, of not trying to constantly tell myself to snap out of it when it's really hard. And it doesn't mean that I don't have, hope. It doesn't mean that I'm not looking for God or actively seeking him, because I've been actively, searching and begging and reaching out for him over these last few years. And yet, I think I kind of talked with you about this before we came on the podcast, but just feeling like a lot of quiet and a lot of, waiting for answers. But it doesn't mean that God isn't here, and it doesn't mean that I'm not, still loving God and hoping for that healing and hoping for that answer. And I think that being able to give ourselves permission in that place to just be wherever we're at is okay. And so I think as God guides me through these, like, really tough places of sickness, I've gotten to know his gentleness even more, and I've gotten to know his compassion on a different level too. I think not even just for myself, but in learning it for other people also in a different way.
Like the compassion that you can give to others because of what you're walking through.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, that's powerful. Well, I would love to chat with you about your ebook. I don't know when you released it. Maybe earlier. Was it in the spring?
It was in the spring that I released it.
So tell me a little bit about that and what's in there, because surely there's a lot about your journey and a lot about these, heart lessons that God's been teaching you.
Yes. So it's called Embrace the Raw, a pilgrimage of the healing heart. And it is just very much about kind of me processing throughout this journey. It's 3 different chapters about different aspects of how my heart's been healing through this. And I think that what I've found in writing it and through people who have read it is that it's a book about real life hard stuff and how to walk through it. I guess how I've honestly and just very authentically been working my way through it. It's not this like very pretty packaged, okay, I overcame all of these hard things. It's here's where my heart was and here's where it is now. Kind of this natural journey of where God can bring our perspective in the midst of some really hard things.
It's showing maybe like improvement and the journey and perspective shift, but it's not like, and the answer, here, I'm at the end.
Yeah.
I've arrived.
Yeah. Just honest stories from my life and some of the key moments in this healing journey and illness journey where I felt like, kind of at my wit's end and wondering, what next. And so just things that God's been speaking to me in the meantime and the things that I'm holding on to as I wait.
Yeah. So you said there's 3 chapters. Would you give me like a little snapshot of each one? Kind of like
Sure.
the heart of each one?
Do you mind if I pull it up real quick?
No, sure, please. No, I expect you to have it memorized. No, I'm just kidding.
So each chapter, the first chapter is titled This Beating Heart, and it's kind of this, it goes back to that moment. I explain what that moment of my heart stopping, how it went down, and where I felt God speaking to me as far as, okay, like when you go through something so life-changing, like coming that close to death's door, it's natural to think like, I don't know, you just look at your life through a different lens, and you have this very sobering reality of, okay, well, life is really short. It's said all the time, life is so short, but we really don't know how long we have, and so how do I want to spend my life in illness? If this is what I'm going to be following this path for a while, it's kind of my heart's response to that event that happened. And then throughout the next couple of chapters, Breaths of Beauty and On the Horizon, it's kind of a little bit of a closer look to how I, going back to that shifting dreams, like how I look for the beauty in the midst of, what my world looks like, in my yard and in the moments I go for a drive, like kind of looking for the beautiful things, even if they're hard to see, just being able to put the lenses on that are looking for something beautiful, because that can very well be kind of the strength that I need for the day, of having that perspective of having something to hold on to that I've seen either that God's done or that He's used someone else to do, to kind of bring some light on my path or in my day. And then On the Horizon is, I think that was my favorite chapter to write, because it's kind of what my prayer is for everyone that reads the book, is being able to still see on the horizon that there are good things in the future, that there are beautiful things that can still come out of this, even if what we're going through is really, really hard and awful, that there are some really beautiful things that we can embrace through looking ahead and wondering and asking what can be a part of my future, even though right now this is really, really hard.
I feel like we all could learn so much from that, whether you're going through chronic illness or not.
I've had several people that have written to me. I know a lot of people have downloaded it, but a few people have written out and just said how they felt like they were reading their own story, and whether or not the experiences were the same, just being able to read through the perspective of, yes, that's where my heart has been sitting. And I think that's been validating for other people, and that's been my hope, is that people are able to feel validated. I think that's been really important to me on my journey, is finding other people who can talk honestly about the heart and not always feel like it has to be polished up and, tied with a bow, but that it's real and it's honest and it's raw. And so that is definitely available for anyone who wants it. It's free. I I really wanted to be able to give it to other people and not have it, be exclusive, but have everyone have access to it. So it is there for whoever wants it.
Well, that's wonderful. And I think your ministry is great and your story is wonderful. And just that authentic vulnerability I appreciate. And I think, like you said, it just, when someone else's story validates your own, there's just something happens. I don't know what it is, something magical. And there can be growth and connection, and somehow I don't know, maybe it's really seeing the heart of God, and maybe it's like a peek into how He's actually looking at us, because He's not condemning. When we're going through hard things, He's not waiting to strike us down. He's, like you said, He wept when His friend died. So, thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for letting me share. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for everyone to hear more about your story and be introduced to your blog, and certainly be encouraged in their journey. So thanks, Kami. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kami. I know I had such a great time chatting with her, and she just felt like a kindred spirit. I know if we lived a little bit closer, we would probably get together for coffee regularly, and that's always a good feeling. I appreciated her heart lesson so much about, how Jesus responded to his friend Lazarus's death, and just the fact that even though he knew he was going to heal Lazarus, he knew it was all going to be over in just a few moments, but he still took the time to grieve with his friends, and that's just so powerful. Such a great example of real emotion, and I feel like it just gives us permission to do the same thing, and to sometimes just sit in our grief and process it. And like Kami said, it's not that we don't believe God can heal. It's not that we don't trust that He's good, or that we don't love Him. But sometimes we just need to sit in that grief and process it and allow ourselves to be there. And that's a great heart lesson, and one that I appreciate so very much. If you want to connect with Kami, you can find her on livinggraceblog.com. And when you go there, you can download her ebook. It's free for anyone who's interested. And you'll also be able to find links to all of her social media sites, so you can follow along and continue to be encouraged in her journey. And don't forget that I'll also have show notes available for this podcast on my website, sarahrieke.com, and you'll be able to click on all the links to find Kami, and I'm going to include her heart lesson and a few other resources that she mentioned, so you can head over there and find out more about today's podcast. Thank you again for listening and for supporting Heart Lessons. I'm so glad you chose to tune in. And if Heart Lessons is an encouragement to you, maybe take the time this week to share it with a friend and spread the word. And I'd really appreciate that. And as always, I hope you're able to come away with a heart lesson that's going to help you draw closer to the Lord. Bye, guys. Hope you have a great week.